And I think that now in his life is the first time that there wasn't kind of an automatic car, the car of the vets, the car of the military, his military buddies, the car of his family, the car of his adolescent friends, and he's kind of lost.
Welcome to another episode of What Drives You, a podcast about family systems and the car. Ellen Chute created the car, a metaphor about families and how we become who we are. Ellen is an LMSW and an adjunct professor at the University of Michigan and has been working with family systems since 1991. She's also founder of Empowerment Partners, a counseling and consultation firm in Michigan. I'm Tolly Taylor, a reporter here in South Bend, Indiana. And this is the first episode we're recording here, which is pretty cool. The first episode that we've recorded in a while. Today we're joined by Paul Chute. And if you notice the last name being familiar, that's because it is. Paul is Ellen's husband and a retired social worker who used to work for the VA. Paul is going to tell us about his family system today, and who better to get him talking about it than Ellen. Go for it, Ellen.
Thanks, Tolly, and thanks, Paul, for being here.
No problem.
So I like to start at the beginning and have you talk a little bit about the family that you were born into.
Great. I'm the youngest of 5 boys. My next oldest brother is 7 years older, so there was a big generational gap. Grew up in a kind of a lower middle class neighborhood. My dad worked in a machine shop. My mother was a stay-at-home mother. It was difficult growing up in this small house. It was a 900 square foot house with 7 people living there, and not a lot of room. So we doubled up, and it was very close knit. That's for sure. And it was close knit for the first few years. It was a nice household. Christmas, Easter, all the holidays. Grandmother and grandfather. But it was a cattle call. I mean, it was like follow the leader, and mom and dad ran a tight ship, and it was difficult.
Thank you. So could you say a little bit about where you saw yourself with these 4 older brothers, and can you say a little bit about the age difference of the older 4? And then you said 7 years, and then you?
Yeah, my other brothers were 2 years apart, all 4 of them. And so they were very close-knit. And I was like kind of an oddball. I was this, young baby in the house when these guys were, pre-adolescent, adolescent. So I was kind of the outside looking in. Nobody really paid much attention to me. I was on my own. I could do pretty much whatever I wanted to do. And as long as I stayed within the framework of, mom and dad's rules, I was fine. Nobody bothered me.
I'm not sure if you said this, but how much younger were you then?
I'm sorry. I'm 7 years younger than my next oldest brother. Okay. So, my oldest brother, we were 13 years apart.
So 13, 11, 9, 7, and
right.
Then you.
You,
right. Years apart.
Got it.
So I talk about the car. You know that
Yes.
Because you are my partner in talking about the car.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about your car growing up, who was in the driver's seat?
Dad was in the driver's seat, for sure. Mom sat on the passenger side, and Mom was a disciplinarian, but it kind of worked around. It worked by ages. We always had a station wagon. So it worked by ages. My oldest brother, Bill, and then my brother Don sat on the other side in the back seat. And then my brother Mike was in the middle. And then at the beginning, it was John and myself sitting in the back of the station wagon facing backwards and looking at the traffic. And that didn't take itself so long. My brother Bill eventually left pretty quickly when I was young. In fact, I think I was probably 5 years old when he left. So it shifted. So my brother John moved to the back seat, and I was all alone in the back looking, because the back seat was always turned to the rear of the car. And I'm waving at all the traffic and making friends with other people, where all the stuff that was happening in the car in the front, I was disconnected.
I can relate with that. Yeah. Turning around and waving at the other people.
Yep.
And I can tell you that for people who know you in your life today, you are still that person that's waving at people and trying to be friendly and
make friends.
Make friends,
Mm-hmm.
right. That's a big part of your personality today. So you were in the back by yourself, and the rest of the family was in the front seats of the car.
It was like two different worlds. I was, as long as I didn't act up or have any problems, I was left alone. And that was the key, because I didn't want my mother's wrath. She was maniacal. And my dad was just a real stern disciplinarian. He didn't hit us or beat us, but you didn't cross Dad. So if Mom kicked it up to Dad, yeah, that was a wait until your dad got home. Yeah, we all ducked for cover, because that was not good. That was not a good thing. But I was on my own. So
would you say that in that position that you felt sort of like you didn't matter?
Oh, I felt like I didn't matter. I mean, it was really clear to me, especially during the summer. It was, okay, after you get up in the morning, have breakfast, you're out. Don't come home until the street lights come on. And they didn't care where you went. I mean, I was riding bicycles, miles away with friends, just going, and nobody cared where we went. We were all over the place, and so many things could have happened to us, but fortunately it didn't. But we were left to our own devices, and it was, I don't know. In some ways, it was a great childhood. I mean, I was able to do what I wanted to do, but there was some, when I was 5, or when I was 1, I mean, I was neglected, obviously, and I was in a stroller and fell down the stairs and fractured my skull. Nobody was watching me. When I was 5, I got run over by a car.
Wow.
Yeah, and nobody was watching me. And so I had these, and I'd break my ankle, or I was always seemingly getting physically hurt. And unfortunately, that wasn't, I used to get yelled at for that, as opposed to being nurtured. It was difficult.
In terms of you and your friends out riding your bikes and sort of nobody caring, was that sort of what happened in your neighborhood?
It really didn't. I mean, I was pretty much the only one. I mean, I had a couple of friends that would, branch out with me, but they were watched. They were taken care of. And in fact, a lot of the other parents were looking over me, making sure I was doing okay. It would have been real easy for me to get into trouble, but I really did fear my mother and father. I didn't want to cross them. It was, and my brothers had a lot to do with that too, because they were watching me too. Believe it or not, I had a really close relationship with my brothers. They were very, very custodial. They were watching me for sure, and made sure nobody messed with me in school or anything like that. I was a Chute boy, and all the teachers knew me. It was like when I came up, I was like always measured against my other brothers, which was not fun. But
Not fun.
Not fun.
So you grew up. Your brothers got older and became teenagers, and ultimately had their own lives to lead, right? Could you talk about that some?
Sure. I think I need to preface it with a little more. My mother and father definitely had some problems, and I didn't know what was going on. All I know is when I turned 5, and I had an eye surgery, and I had a lazy eye that I was born with, and they were correcting it. And I know just shortly thereafter, I remember sitting in a hospital by myself. It's like my parents didn't really visit. I was in this room by myself, and I remember being very scared about that. But then right after that, not sure, my mother left, but she took me with her. And
she left your dad?
Yeah, she left my dad. She left the family, but she took me. And I remember living in this trailer with her. And I was just always scared. I got stuck in a new school. And I remember walking to this department store that I knew my dad used to frequent because I wanted to go home so bad. This store was like probably 5 miles away from this trailer. And some couple picked me up. And like, what are you doing out here? Because it was like early at night. And they ended up taking me back to the trailer. Yeah, and it was really scary. Shortly thereafter, my dad did come back and get me. But
And so your mom moved back home.
She moved back home eventually, but that was the first traumatic time. And my brothers were, they were just as equally scared. I remember because we came home to a house that was meticulous. They were trying to get my mom back, but that was a really hard time. And then later on, my mother left again at 12, and she was gone for good.
Could you say more about that?
Yeah, I came home from school, and I remember that my father's car was in the driveway, and my dad is never home. He always worked 12 hours a day, so I would come home, and Mom would usually be there. And he was home, and I thought, oh my God, what happened? I walked in, my dad was in the bedroom, and my mother had left me a note that she was leaving, be good in school, be good in sports, and that was it. And I didn't see her again for 7 years.
So she was gone for your whole adolescence.
Whole adolescence, yeah, she was gone for that.
Could you also say about where your brothers were?
My brothers were leaving too, one at a time, which was equally difficult for me. My oldest brother, Bill, was gone at that time. My brother Don was in Vietnam at the time. He had been drafted, and he had just spent his 3rd year in Vietnam. My brother Mike just got drafted. Unfortunately, he didn't go to Vietnam. And my brother John had just joined the Navy. And so they were all gone. And then my mother left. So everybody left. And I was just there with Dad. And my dad was incredibly depressed by this whole incident. And again, I was left to my own devices, and I could do whatever I want. And it was a difficult time for me. I could have very well have gotten into trouble. Unfortunately, I turned to school and to sports, and I had some really good teachers that kind of took me under their wing. And boy, I just count myself as being extremely lucky at that time. But it was really hard. I lost everybody within 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That must have been really something.
It was really hard. I just remember, I just remember it was very traumatizing. I couldn't cry. I couldn't show anger.
Because?
Who was going to listen?
Okay.
I mean, who would have listened to me at that point?
I think what you're talking about there are sort of the rules of the car.
Yeah, the rules of the car was the same thing. It's just, you just don't show any emotion, and if you did, you were going to get checked. It was just, it was really, I found myself getting a little emotional about it right now, but it was really hard. I found myself actually taking care of my father when my mother left.
Mm-hmm.
I was more, here's this big, this guy lifted steel every day. It was just this huge guy, and I'm holding him while he's crying. I'm 12 years old, and I'm holding this man, World War II veteran, holding him and while he's crying, and I didn't have a place to cry. It was really hard.
Just to focus that a little bit, you sort of shed some light on this, but what did that do? What did all those departures do to the dynamic of your car? Where would you say you started sitting once it became just you and your dad?
Well, the car was disintegrated. It was a whole different car at that point then. I ended up being in the passenger seat with my father. And it was like being transported to another world. I was no longer in the back waving at people. I was in front taking care of my dad and making sure he was okay. And you know what? I walked and rode my bike pretty much everywhere I wanted to go. Then, I'd go to Little League games. I'd ride my bike or walk. To school, I'd walk. I don't remember doing a lot of driving with my dad, to tell you the truth. Yeah.
So it's like the car really disintegrated.
It really did disintegrate.
It wasn't there for either of you.
No, it was gone. But when I did drive with my father, I was in the passenger seat, and it was, and I was so cognizant of what was going on with him that I really didn't pay much attention to what was up with me.
So I'd like to just sort of talk about the metaphor here, that here you were this little boy, an extra. You weren't in the 4 boys. No. You were separate from the 4 boys, and you were in the back seat by yourself, and the people that you were trying to connect to were outside of the car altogether.
You're gone.
And then the actual car itself disintegrates because nobody's left in it except you and your dad doesn't seem to have the wherewithal to actually step into the driver's seat and be there to drive you during your adolescence?
The things that, when I didn't have any connection to my brothers at that point. They were gone. Literally, they were gone. They were off doing their own thing. And again, my mother was gone. So I was stuck just really fending for myself. I did my own laundry. I cooked my own food. I washed my own dishes. At 12 years old, I'm doing all this. And ironically, as I got older, I'll just jump into this. When I turned 16, my dad bought me this just crappy Ford station wagon. And bless his heart, he bought me a car. But, I mean, it was just the worst car ever. But when I turned 16, he used to give me $100 and I'd have to go shopping, grocery shopping for the house. So I'm doing the grocery shopping, I'm washing the dishes, I'm doing the laundry, and I'm playing football and I'm playing sports. I'm doing all my own stuff here on top of going to school and getting good grades and trying to be this. And I really had a good athletic career. I mean, was a world champion baseball player. And,
right. So would it be fair to say that this car did not prepare you to be on your own, taking care of yourself at that time?
No, it didn't. It did. I mean, I was just again, left to my own devices. There was so many things I could have done or I would have wanted to do that I couldn't do now because I was so focused on just taking care of myself and just taking care of him. Surviving, basically. That's basic all I was survival. Doing. Yeah. It was just enough to get up in the morning and walk to school. And I mean, it wasn't a short walk.
Right.
I'm not saying, I don't want to paint that picture. I mean, everybody walked. But it was just, it was really hard. It was really hard. Cooking, I learned how to cook at a very early age, and I still cook today, you know that?
Yes, right. So I'd like to jump ahead a little. Would that be okay?
Fine.
To after high school and after you had a few years of sort of not knowing where you were going, and I know that just because I'm your wife, to talk about the military.
Well, let me do this real quick. When I graduated from high school, and that was the requirement my father had. I had to graduate from high school. He didn't really care about anything else. You graduate from high school, that was it. So the day after I graduated from high school, I hitchhiked to Denver, Colorado, from Detroit, Michigan. To Denver, Colorado.
In order to
just get away. My brother Bill lived in Denver at that time, and the car I had was dead. I had some graduation money, and I just had to get out of there. I just had to leave. So I literally hitchhiked across country. I was 18 at the time. And
in terms of the car metaphor, I believe you were searching for a car.
I was looking big time for a car.
Right.
And got to Denver, and I ended up getting a job. But those years were crazy. Mm-hmm. I was, again, left on my own. I was struggling just to make ends meet and so on and so forth.
And is that how you ended up in the military?
That's how I ended up in the military. I pretty much I was living in San Diego. I ended up in San Diego at the time. I ended up getting a car, and I was living in San Diego, and I was living on the beach with someone, and that didn't turn out too well. So I had two options. I either go back to Detroit, which I didn't want to do, or go in the military. And, at that time they had all the military branches at the same location. The first one was the Navy. I walked in and I asked him, okay, can you take me? He says, well, you'll have to wait 6 months. I said, that's not going to work. I went to the next one, which is the Air Force, and I said, can you take me? He says, yeah, I can get you on a plane by Friday. And it was Wednesday. I said, can you put me up? He says, yeah, we'll put you up in a hotel. I'm in. Rock and roll. So that's how I got in the Air Force. That's how I joined. And
you found a car there,
I found a car real quick. It was quite a change because this long hair, bearded, hippie looking dude ends up in basic training, and all of a sudden my head shaved, my beard shaved, and it was a whole different life. Yeah, I was definitely in a different place.
Okay, so I don't want to derail this thought pattern, but I do want to quickly interject because I think that's something interesting you said, Ellen. If someone finds themselves without a car, like we're learning about with Paul here, is it very typical to immediately go out and search for a new one? And sort of what happens there?
If it's a person who desires connection, and I think some of that is DNA and some of that is just Paul, he didn't say it now, but I know that he was always extremely connected. His teenage car really was with his friends. His baseball player friends and his football player friends. So he went from that car after it disintegrated and created this adolescent car of friends and friends' family. And so knowing him, I knew that he would be in search of another car. And so for someone who does that, yes, they do create cars. We create cars throughout our lifetime. After our cars disintegrate or don't exist anymore or don't serve our needs anymore.
Yeah, and those jumps to different cars must be a real time of sort of panic and self-reflection for some people, I would think.
And instability often.
And instability, yeah.
Right, because people don't say to themselves, oh, I'm going to go create a new car. They just know that there's stuff missing and that they need to have that around them in order to, be able to live every day.
Maybe that'll become part of the vernacular after people listen to this podcast.
Okay, that sounds cool.
I need to find a new car.
Yes, right, exactly.
So back to you starting in the military.
Well, it's ironic to bring that up. I think I was really scared in San Diego when I enlisted. I had nowhere to go, literally nowhere to go. I mean, I could have gone back to Detroit, but that to me was a nightmare. That was just thrusting myself back into, I would have probably ended up in a factory, working in a factory. I didn't want to do that. Living at home with my dad, I definitely didn't want to do that. So I was in search of something, some kind of connection. And the military at that time, 1980, was very glad to have me post Vietnam. They were, crying for people, and they were more than happy to have me.
So I'd like to jump ahead a little bit to what happens after basic training and after your initial enlistment in the military.
I didn't usually join with a job. You have a guaranteed job that you go. I didn't have one. I basically just said, do with me what you want. And they did. Fortunately, I tested very high. So I ended up becoming a pararescueman. And it's not one of those jobs that the washout rate for pararescuemen is probably about 85 to 90%. And there was just no way that I could wash out. The training that I had was intensive. It took a while before I got done. Jump school, physical training, medical training. Yeah, it was very intense. But I felt like I belonged. I felt like there was, they needed me, and I felt like I was doing something good.
So it might have been the first time in your life where you felt like you mattered and you were valuable.
Yeah, I mean,
and that you had this potential.
I was still taking care of myself, but I was fine. I found out I was thriving. Like everything that they threw at me, I was doing well. And, firing a weapon, like jumping out of planes, the medical stuff I did very well. I was doing really, really great with everything that they were throwing at me. And, thank God. I don't know what would have happened.
I'm really glad, because if you ever need someone to take out a splinter, this is your guy.
Yeah, I'm definitely good at that.
It's really, I've benefited from a lot of that.
Yeah.
Not the weapons part. But,
and I can sew you up if you
need
need to.
Yes, right.
I feel like for a pararescueman,
Yeah,
it's
right.
a little below his pay grade.
A little bit,
A little
yes.
bit.
Yeah.
So you were in the military for 8 years?
8 years.
As a pararescueman?
Yes.
All over the world?
All over the world.
And you created family in that?
I did.
With your men?
I actually got married. I found a woman. She was in the Army. And we married quickly. It was kind of a quick marriage. But it was really a weird situation. I created this family, but we really weren't married. It was still it was a convenience marriage, because in the military you get married, you get more money. So it just worked out that we got better housing, we got just better everything. And I ended up, I don't know if I loved her, but then I began to love her, but she never loved me. And it was really a difficult relationship.
And your military job took you away for months at a time,
Yeah,
correct?
I was gone most of the time, and you know, and she never questioned it. I mean, I'd get a call at 3 in the morning, and they'd call it a bag drag. You know, they'd call you up and say, "Grab your bags, we're going." So you grab your bag and your rifle, and you're gone, and nobody knows where you're at. It's not like they had cell phones back then, and you can call home and find out, or computers. That you just couldn't do that. It wasn't the way it worked out. So she didn't know where I was, and in many ways she didn't care.
Right.
And I don't blame her for that. I don't have any hard feelings for that. It's just the way it was.
Your car at that time and your family at that time was your guys and your unit,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah. At that point, I'd started making rank. I was, putting on stripes, and I ended up starting to take care of the guys under me, and that became difficult. That was hard because I'm worried about these guys getting shot, and I'm not so much worried about me. And that's not a good thing to be doing when you're in the work I was doing.
So you stay in the military for 8 years, and then you decide, I don't want to do this anymore?
Well, there's a story behind that. I was stationed in Hawaii at the time, and I knew that I was going to be there for probably 6 months without a deployment. So one of the things you want to do to make rank, to put on strike, you want to volunteer, do some volunteer work. So I volunteered on a suicide crisis line, and I found out I was good at it. And I had a friend who was a social worker, and the work really intrigued me. And I decided then that I wanted to go to social work school.
So you left the military.
I ended up getting my degree while I was in the military. I took classes wherever I could. Took me 8 years, but I ended up doing it. And I got out of the military, and I ended up working for the post office for 3 years because my wife at the time my first wife, was going to law school. I put her through law school. And so I kind of put off what I wanted to do, but I was going to grad school because the military was going to pay for it. I had gotten hurt while I was in the military, so they were giving me a disability. So I put her through law school, and she came home one day and decided that she didn't want to be a lawyer. And after 3 years of carrying mail, I decided that I didn't want to be her husband anymore. So that fizzled. It had 15 years about when we were married, and that's when I got into social work school and met somebody very special.
Paul and I met in social work school. Yes.
Spoiler alert.
Yes, spoiler alert.
So to sort of encapsulate, so you get out of the military, you've now been taught that you have all these gifts. You were really good at a lot of things.
A lot of things.
Like?
Well, rescuing people from in the jungle, search and destroy missions. It's hard to talk about. A lot of different areas. I spent a lot of time down in Central America, Honduras, Nicaragua, back in, everybody remembers Iran-Contra.
Right.
Yeah, I was running around in the jungles back then.
So is it safe to say that when you got out of the military, you didn't have anywhere to use those skills?
Let me try to explain how the military works. You have an ID, and you can go in the gate, and you can go on the base, and you can do whatever you want on the military base. When you get out of the military, they take that card away. And when you walk out that gate, you can't walk back in. So it was like being transported again to another world. I was all of a sudden a civilian, where I'd been for 8 years, told what to wear, told what to eat, told where to go, so on and so forth. Now I'm on my own again. And that was scary.
Without a car.
Without a car, again. And I had to make it work again. And that 3 years the first year was unbelievably tough, trying to find my way and find, just anything. I mean, it was just really, really hard, really hard.
So you decided sometime after MSW school that you wanted to give back to military veterans. You identified with them?
I definitely identified with them. And, I worked
Is it fair to say that they felt like a car to you?
Very much. Well, we all connected. I mean, I'm working with these kids that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. That was the job I had, was working with the combat vets. That's all I worked with. So, I mean, we had a special bond. We had a connection. I mean, we chewed the same dirt, and I knew what it was like for them to walk away, walk out that gate and be alone out there. It is really a lonely feeling. You're driving $1 million or $2 million equipment. You're running all kinds of gear. You're running men. You're just very important, and all of a sudden that's off. It's just like the switch is off. So I could relate to these guys when we're coming back, but it was really hard because it was stirring up a lot of my stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I still hadn't probably dealt with, which I needed to,
Mm-hmm.
and I eventually did work through a lot of it, and still am. I'm working through a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. So where do you think you are in a car now?
Yeah, I don't know.
Who's in your car?
I'm a driver for the most part. You're in the car with me, and you're always in the passenger seat. But you drive. You drive a lot, but you don't drive the car. But you drive. You drive the marriage. There's a lot that you do. Now that I'm retired, you're still working, and you're still out there plowing the road. So I see myself in the driver's seat, and I see myself as, Grandpa, Grump, as my grandkids call me. And I'm that paternal figure, but, it's still Nana's house, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. That's I love it that way. It's really special.
Do you feel as though your cars in your life prepared you or didn't prepare you for this time in your life?
Oh, no, they didn't prepare me for this time in life. I mean, I've had a bevy of experience doing a host of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm situated here at this point in my life, trying to figure out what the hell am I going to do. And I have many skills and I can do many different things, but I'm still lost. I might be driving a car, but the directions aren't real set yet, and I'm lost. I'm still trying to figure it all out.
You had so many times in your life where you were lost, trying to figure it out.
This is different. This is a little bit different. I don't have anything to join, or there's no. I don't want to say there's no safety net. I mean, it's not like I'm. We're doing well. I mean, we're doing well, and I'm not going to complain about the position I'm in, but I still would like to do some things. And thought about writing, and then I think to myself, well, who wants to read anything that I write? And that's not fair. I mean, I have a lot to tell.
Well, that's what you learned in your car.
Yeah, audience can't see, but I'm raising my hand. I'd like to. This is already a pretty fascinating story. Yeah.
He'd like to read it.
Yeah, if you write that book, I'll buy the first copy.
Okay, I appreciate that.
But you see how his learning in the car that he doesn't matter and not important take precedence. They're gonna stop it.
Yeah, I mean, before we started recording, you took us through the different bullet points that we were going to discuss, and you highlighted some of the amazing talents and qualities he had. And all I noticed was him sitting back in the chair, head down, sort of deflecting. Right. He couldn't, making self-deprecating comments and things like that. Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Right.
And I think for so many people, this place where Paul is right now, where there isn't just the necessity of having to get up and do this today in order to whatever, get a paycheck or fulfill other people's obligations, and unless without that direction, and I believe for Paul especially, that even though he was in the back seat of that car waving outward, that he very, very much identified as being a part of this group of boys.
Yeah.
And he still does. It's his primary identification. And I think that now in his life is the first time that there wasn't kind of an automatic car.
Right.
the car of the vets, the car of the military, his military buddies, the car of his family, the car of his adolescent friends, and he's kind of lost. And while we are in the car together, and there are at times other extraneous people, children, grandchildren, things like that, they are not really part of his envisioning of his group. He always had a car, and now he doesn't. And he kind of doesn't know what to do now. And it's hard at this stage of the game to make a car for yourself.
Right.
It's just hard.
There's another piece to it. I've lost 2 brothers already. And I have one brother that's really, he's ill. So I'm watching my brothers pass away again. They're going away.
Leave.
Yeah, they're leaving. I mean, certainly not that they want to, but they're leaving. And again, I'm feeling that. Let's face it, I do have PTSD. There's no question. I mean, I own that, and I'm trying to deal with that. But it's very traumatic. It's like being traumatized all over again.
Or living in anticipation of the car emptying again.
Again, living again with that. And so I almost kind of separate myself from my brothers now, my last 2 brothers. And that's really bad. I need to be more connected to them.
Well, it's not bad. It's just about fear.
Yeah, it is. I'm just really scared.
Right.
And it's hard for me to say because, I'm not the kind of guy that's going to walk around and tell people I'm afraid. But I am.
And I would guess every time you see them, you're confronted with that fear.
Yeah,
as if it's fresh.
Right. And it's really fresh. And it's like, what do I do? I can't stop it. It's not like I can, you can just put something in the page there and mark it. You can't because there's no control. So it's difficult. And so, yeah, it's hard. And again, I'm getting emotional about it, but everybody's walking away. The only consistent piece in my life is you
Mm-hmm.
and the kids, and the grandkids.
Mm-hmm.
And being that they're my stepchildren,
Mm-hmm.
I adore them, and I know they love me and appreciate me, and we have wonderful Sunday dinners and everything. It's just really great. It's the only, even though it's a really kind of a perfect family per se, it's still somewhat disconnected from me.
Oh, absolutely. They were not in your car. Like their parents were in my car.
Right. Right.
So my connection with them is very different than your connection coming in at this time of their lives, even though it's been 20 years. It's very different. You guys have never really been in a car together.
No.
So that inherent experience is missing for you.
Right.
It would be hard for anyone who wasn't in that car to try to carve out a seat for themselves in that car.
So I wonder what it would be like. I know that I'm sitting here trying to figure out what my car, and I wonder how many people out there have the same situation.
Exactly.
Trying to figure out where their place in the car is, because it's really scary for me. And like I said, I wonder what it's like for everybody else. I really haven't talked to anybody else that's in a situation like me.
I work with families with aging older adults and the difficulties in the car getting rearranged as people who were always the driver need to step into a different seat, and people who are always the passenger needing to step up into the driver's seat. And so there's just lots and lots of times throughout life that cars change, rearrange, there isn't a car all of a sudden, and those are really important developmental milestones that we often don't acknowledge in that way as a society.
Yeah, and the thing that this makes me think of, and maybe the similarities to this are very limited. Take this completely with a grain of salt, but what this had me thinking of in my life was when I lost my job a little over a year ago. I realized everything that I was doing with my job and my daily life was giving me value. right? I was taking value from that, and that gave me self-worth. And so then when I lost the job, I had to find my own self-worth. I had to generate that myself. And man, was that brutal. Yeah. That was so difficult to do. And so when I hear about you, stepping away from the VA and trying to figure out what's next, I mean, for me, I relate to that on the job front. It was, what is next? And so, when I, had a job interview or something like that, I would get so anxious because I wanted that feeling to return. I wanted that outside thing to come back into my life to give me self-worth, because that is just so much easier. It's so much easier to do. And as we go throughout life, I think, in my life, school giving, grades giving me self-worth, and then jumping into jobs and things like that. And so when you go through a period where it's all those sort of outside influencers are dead or missing, sometimes it can be, for me, it was until the age of 29, I never had to confront generating my own self-worth and confront that feeling. And so it sounds like the one similarity that I see here, and obviously what you've been through, I think, is a much, much more intense version of this. But the one feeling that seems similar is, you had these jumps and you had periods of uncertainty, but you found your next jump, and now you're in this, you can't see the next jump.
Can't see it. It's really, I mean, I have so many good things, but there's a place, it's a bundle of things that I could list to you. Oh, I could do this, 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 but I'm not doing it. And why? And it's all fear. It's all about fear. And I need to come to grips with that. And I guess I'm realizing that right now, even more, that I need to tackle this fear, because I really haven't been, well, I guess I've been afraid for most of my life, but I've been able to deal with it.
Well, I'd like to say something about that. I feel like you've always had a car around you when you had to tackle your fear, whether it was your boyfriends as a teenager who helped you tackle your fear that your mother was gone, or it was the guys on your unit in the military who helped you deal with all the losses of the military. And then when you came out of the military, you still had some of those old guys around that were there for you to be there somewhat on this transition. And for lots and lots of different reasons, I feel like what you're missing is people in a car with you, and that is, I feel like it's like a fundamental security for you that's not in your life right now. And just one person who's busy doing her life isn't enough. It isn't enough. So I think it's the other way around. I think that when you create a car for yourself now, then you will know what to do. Because it's hard to do on your own. For some people they can, but for some people it's really hard, and they feel lost and scared and stuck. And your ability to articulate that is different than most.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's hard. It's hard being in this position, but I appreciate it. I've learned a lot doing this. It's been helpful.
Thanks.
Do we feel like, are there other points that we want to address with this?
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good, yeah.
Okay.
Paul, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Paul, for sharing so much of this. And this was, very interesting to learn about, and a lot of different a lot of different points to take away, I think. And Ellen's final point there, I thought, was really insightful as well. That finding the car first, and then being able to jump to what you want to do next. That's flipping it around. Not something I thought of. All right, well, this has been the 6th episode of What Drives You, and I'm Tolly Taylor, joined here today, of course, by Ellen Chute and our special guest, Paul Chute, and Ellen and I will catch you next time.